At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986. An explosion occurred in reactor number 4, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Not figuratively, not as a warning. It literally blew itself to pieces. And the 4 million kilogram reactor lid flew into the air like a coin. But this wasn't a coin toss with a winner. A column of superheated graphite and nuclear fuel rose into the sky above Pripyat. It glowed with a blue light. First responders would later describe it as beautiful. Several of them died within weeks. So, was it an accident, was it inevitable, or was it a decision? And here's the question no one dared to ask out loud. What if that very night, a young engineer had ordered the reactor to be shut down? Today we'll shed light on all of this. In this video, we'll discuss the design flaw hidden within the RBMK reactor. The Soviet system that silenced the engineers who discovered it. That fateful night when everything fell apart. And an alternative history that's almost as real as the actual one. Let's lay out the timeline. The calendar reads April 25, 1986, routine maintenance and a safety test are scheduled for reactor number 4. The test had already been postponed once. Plant management is under pressure to complete the safety test before the scheduled maintenance. By 1:23 a.m. on April 26, the reactor's power surges past 30,000 megawatts. That's exactly 10 times the reactor's maximum operating capacity. 2 consecutive explosions shatter the night. Contemporary engineers made it clear, the RBMK had a known flaw. It became unstable at low power levels, prone to sudden, catastrophic overloads. Soviet officials were just as candid as the engineers, at least among themselves. Reports had been compiled regarding this flaw. Within a system that did not reward bad news, they had been shelved. And they had vanished into silence. To understand what happened at Chernobyl, one must first understand what the Soviet Union envisioned for it. In the mid-1980s, the USSR was a multinational state held together by the motto of invincibility. The RBMK reactor, powerful and domestically designed, was part of that illusion. They no longer needed Western technology. It simply worked. But it wasn't fully understood. Not entirely. The tension in the control room that night wasn't chaotic. It was extremely quiet. It was the kind of tension that weighed heavily on everyone's shoulders. The reactor power had dropped far below the level the engineers had planned. The test should have been cancelled at that moment. Everyone in that room, at some point, understood this. But the shift supervisor's orders were absolute. And in 1986 Soviet Ukraine, orders held as much force as gravity, keeping the world in place. This design flaw was well known. Reports on the design were written. Engineers raised concerns. But a system built on the doctrine that it could not fail left no room for dissent. The explosion at Chernobyl was no surprise. It was a prediction that had finally come true. The RBMK's graphite-tipped control rods, designed to slow down the reaction, briefly accelerated it before they could bring it under control. In a literal sense, this was a feature that behaved like a weapon. At 1:23 a.m., the emergency shutdown system was activated. But the rods had already begun entering the reactor core. The reaction surged to its peak. What followed lasted 4 seconds. The radioactive fallout spared no borders. A cluster of radioactive clouds drifted northwest, passing over Belarus and reaching as far as Scandinavia and Western Europe. The first to alert the world were Swedish nuclear power plant workers who arrived for the morning shift. Their radiation alarms triggered immediately. Moscow remained silent for nearly 2 days. But here's the alternative story that history doesn't let us think about out loud. What if the test had been cancelled? In our alternative history, a young engineer named Leonid is monitoring his instruments. He notices the power rising abnormally. He says it out loud, "We need to stop the test." And without hesitation, the test is cancelled. Outside, Pripyat continues to sleep. The sky remains dark. The blue light never rises. Pripyat was evacuated approximately 36 hours after the explosion. Toys left on the ground, meals left uneaten. A modern city, frozen in time, is slowly being reclaimed by the forest. And the same questions about nuclear energy, silenced institutions, ignored warnings, are still being asked today. Turning points in history rarely announce themselves in advance. They arrive at 1:22 a.m., in the half-second before a weary engineer decides whether or not to speak. Some disasters leave destruction in their wake, others leave lessons. Chernobyl gave the world both, destruction and a lesson. Let me know in the comments, do you think Chernobyl was an accident, or the predictable outcome of a system not designed to fail? Subscribe, hit the bell and see you next week.